When Mongol warriors broke through a city's defenses, the slaughter was just the start. Women who survived were dragged into the streets, tied together with rough ropes that bit into their flesh. Some had marks burned into their skin to show their new owner. Others were made to walk barefoot across the still hot ruins of their houses. But what came next was even more terrible. A nightmare repeated in every conquered town. Imagine this. You're standing where your home once stood. Thin smoke curls from broken roofs, mixing with the pale dawn light. The air stinks of burning crops, charred wood and blood. Broken dishes crunch underfoot as you step over a wrecked cart. Somewhere close, a child whimpers, the only sound in the eerie quiet. They've arrived. The invaders you thought were just scary stories now move through your streets. Warriors in fur-lined armor stained from battle. They work with terrifying efficiency, every move deliberate. There's no drunken celebration, just cold control. These aren't ordinary raiders. They're conquerors with a system. For years, travelers whispered about the Mongols. Armies appearing like ghosts, cities vanishing in days, whole peoples erased. The tales seemed impossible, yet even distant lands spoke their name with fear. Now you understand, the truth is worse than the stories. No one told you how calculated the cruelty would be, how it would break people's minds before their bodies failed. The Mongols had turned conquest into a science. Their battlefield speed matched only by how quickly they crushed resistance. For women in a fallen city, survival wasn't chance. It was part of a plan as organized as stringing bows or saddling horses. This wasn't random violence. It was a weapon sharper than any sword, meant to send a message far beyond these broken walls. That message would travel across deserts and plains to kings and peasants alike. Fight us, and we'll destroy everything. Your people, your spirit, even your memory. Many cities surrendered the moment Mongol banners appeared. Those that resisted faced what you're seeing now. As warriors fan out through the streets, your city's fate begins. To understand what comes next, you must know these conquerors. The Mongols weren't always an empire. They started as wandering tribes on Asia's vast grasslands, constantly fighting over grazing lands and livestock. Life on the open plains was brutal, requiring endless movement and unbreakable toughness. Only those who mastered riding and archery from childhood could hope to survive. In the late 12th century, a man named Temujin began uniting these rival tribes. He offered loyalty to those who followed him and destruction to those who resisted. By combining personal charisma with ruthless discipline, he transformed a divided land into a single fighting force. When he took the title of Genghis Khan, meaning universal ruler, the foundations of history's most fearsome military power were laid. The Mongol army was unlike anything settled civilizations had faced. Every soldier was a skilled rider and archer, trained to shoot accurately at full gallop. They could cover over 100 kilometers in a day, striking deep into enemy territory before defenders could react. Their supplies came not from wagons but from herds that traveled with them, allowing campaigns across vast distances. But their speed was only part of their strength. The Mongols mastered psychological warfare. When met with resistance, they created such horrific examples that the next city would surrender without fighting. This wasn't mindless violence, it was calculated strategy to ensure swift conquest. The treatment of captives, especially women, served this purpose perfectly. Stories of what followed Mongol victories spread faster than their cavalry, carried intentionally by spared survivors to weaken resistance elsewhere. During their early expansion, this method crushed powerful enemies. The Khwarezm Empire saw entire cities erased, with a few traumatized survivors left to spread terror. Russian principalities watched as fortified towns were systematically dismantled, their people reduced to ashes or slaves. Now your city has joined this grim history. What unfolds will follow their established pattern, stage by deliberate stage. The Mongols don't just win battles, they erase civilizations, ensuring nothing can rise again. The soldiers move in coordinated lines, some with torches, others with rope. The first stage isn't killing, it's separation. This is when the women realize their true ordeal is just beginning. The invisible scars they'll bear in the coming days will never fade. After breaching city walls, the Mongols' first priority isn't slaughter. It's control. They knew battlefield victory was only half the conquest. The real subjugation came through systematic terror, with women's fates serving as their most powerful weapon. As the warriors begin their grim work, you understand why no empire could withstand them. They didn't just defeat armies, they broke the human spirit itself. The rest was won in the minds of the defeated. That is why the first moments after their soldiers entered a city were carefully orchestrated to shatter the will of any survivors. They began with the symbols of your life. Flags bearing the colors of your rulers were torn down and replaced with simple, stark banners of the Mongol army. Public buildings were taken first. The palace, the marketplace, the temple, all secured within minutes by riders who seemed to know exactly where to go. Those who resisted in these final moments were cut down without hesitation. Their bodies left where they fell. Then came the sound. Not the chaos of drunken looters, but a strange rhythm. Mongol commanders signaled their troops with horns or drums, and here these sounds served a new purpose: to let every surviving citizen know the city was no longer there. The noise echoed through the streets in deliberate patterns, each beat a reminder that resistance was over. In these early hours, the Mongols displayed their captives with calculated purpose. Wounded defenders were paraded through main thoroughfares, their armor stripped away, heads bowed. This wasn't to honor bravery, but to demonstrate that even your strongest men were now powerless. Any remaining armed fighters were hunted down methodically, leaving only the unarmed and helpless. The Mongols cultivated fear not just for the present moment, but as a spreading sickness. That's why they allowed select people to flee, messengers who would carry detailed tales of the conquest to neighboring towns. These stories of what had been done, and what was coming, became weapons as potent as Mongol arrows. By the time soldiers completed this first stage, the city became unrecognizable. The walls, streets, even the air itself seemed to belong to someone else. With this psychological conquest achieved, the Mongols prepared for the next phase: population division. Once full control was established, they implemented their methodical sorting process, a routine perfected through countless conquests. Soldiers herded people from homes into open squares or main streets, shouting commands in an incomprehensible language. The purpose wasn't communication, but to treat the conquered like livestock. Men of fighting age were separated first. The wounded were executed immediately, often before the crowd. Healthy men were bound in groups of 10 or 20, and led away. The Mongols knew these men could never be trusted as slaves. Potential threats were eliminated completely. Some were worked to exhaustion before execution, extracting final usefulness before disposal. Older men, boys too young to fight, and elders faced varied fates. Some were killed outright, especially if resources were scarce or resistance had been fierce. Others might be spared for labor under armed guard. Then came the women's sorting, perhaps the most chilling in its clinical efficiency. Mounted officers conducted swift inspections, evaluating youth, health, and usefulness. The most physically able were selected for immediate transport with the army. Others were designated for local servitude. Mothers with young children might be kept together, but only if the children showed future value. The sorting process stripped away the last fragments of normal life. Families were broken apart with a single soldier's gesture. Protests were silenced by blade or bowstring. Within hours, the city's entire social fabric was torn apart. When complete, the Mongols had remade the population into controllable captives, isolated individuals without family or community protection. As chosen women were gathered for their forced journey, the conquest's next phase began. With the population divided, the Mongols publicly marched their captives from the city. This was no secret operation, but a power display meant to be witnessed. Selected women, along with some young boys and skilled artisans, formed the column's center, surrounded by mounted guards ensuring no escape. The march often began while city fires still burned behind them, the air thick with destruction's scent. Ahead lay open country offering no shelter. The Mongols deliberately routed captives past villages and well-traveled roads to spread word of their conquest faster. Each step served as warning to the next city. Those too weak to continue were abandoned. Their lives ended quickly. Survivors quickly learned that slowing meant death. Guards maintained a relentless pace, using the march itself as control. With each mile, captives were severed further from their past, their ties cut as sharply as any blade. This was more than transport. It was a living proclamation of Mongol dominance. The sight of disciplined riders herding broken captives convinced onlookers that resistance was futile. A message needing no translation. The YouTube engagement portion has been removed as it breaks the historical narrative flow. As the column progressed, captives realized this journey was reshaping their destinies. The next stage would determine each person's fate, where they'd end up, whether they'd ever see loved ones again. For many, this decision would seal fates that still unsettle historians today. When the forced march ended, captives reached temporary camps or secured Mongol settlements. Here began the allocation, the decisive moment when each captive's long-term fate was determined by their conqueror. For the women, this process was never random. Senior commanders personally oversaw the selection, flanked by armed guards. The youngest, healthiest women without physical scars were chosen first. High-ranking officers claimed some as concubines or personal attendants. Others were distributed as rewards to common soldiers. The Mongol leadership knew human spoils motivated their warriors more than gold or horses. Not all captives remained with the army. Many women were dispersed across the empire's vast territory. Skilled weavers, cooks, and artisans might serve noble households or military camps. Others were deliberately scattered far from homelands to prevent any chance of reunion or rebellion. Even those spared violence lost all freedom. Every action was monitored. Speaking one's native language, disobedience, or escape attempts meant instant, public execution. Some women faced decades of bondage, traded like livestock, gifted to secure alliances, their identities erased to fit their captors' needs. This wasn't mindless cruelty, but calculated empire building. By integrating captives, the Mongols turned conquest into lasting labor and wealth. After surviving siege, forced marches and allocation, one final horror remained: the complete erasure of their former lives. With captives removed, the Mongols methodically destroyed the city itself. Fortifications were demolished, gates burned, defensive towers reduced to rubble. Sacred sites were looted, then desecrated, attacking the people's spiritual core. Markets and grain stores were torched, water sources poisoned. The Mongols sometimes altered geography itself, diverting rivers, collapsing irrigation, rendering the land uninhabitable. If the city lay on a trade route, they built new Mongol-controlled settlements nearby, redirecting commerce from the ruins. Streets that once bustled with life fell silent. Nature would eventually reclaim the land, but the culture that thrived there was extinguished forever. For survivors scattered across the empire, only memories remained. To the Mongols, this wasn't vengeance but strategy. A razed city couldn't rebel or inspire resistance. It became a warning etched into the earth itself, more enduring than any battlefield victory. Each destruction fed a growing legend that spread faster than their armies could ride, making fear itself their most powerful weapon. During the rapid expansion under Genghis Khan and his successors, this fearsome reputation became their most potent weapon. The destruction of a single city could convince entire kingdoms to surrender without resistance. The Mongols carefully cultivated this terror, using traumatized survivors as messengers, whose horrific accounts spread faster than any army could march. Though these stories often grew more exaggerated with each retelling, that only made them more effective. Faced with the Mongol threat, rulers weighed their options carefully. They knew victory was nearly impossible. Defeat meant not just their death, but the complete annihilation of their people, culture, and place in history. Many chose to open their gates and offer tribute rather than risk total destruction. Even when accepting surrender, The Mongols dictated harsh terms. For the captured women, their lives became threads in the empire's vast tapestry. Some entered Mongol households, bearing children who would know only the steppe as home. Others vanished into distant territories, thousands of miles from their birthplaces, their dispersal helping erase the cultural memory of conquered peoples. The brilliance of this system meant the Mongols didn't need to destroy every city. The terror preceding them did half the work. Entire regions submitted without fighting, their leaders desperate to avoid the fate they'd heard described in such vivid detail. This psychological warfare, combined with their unmatched mobility and discipline, allowed the Mongol Empire to stretch from the Pacific to Eastern Europe in less than a century. Now your city stands as just another smoking ruin, its streets silent not from peace but from absence. The few survivors have been scattered to the winds, their stories already spreading to terrify the next potential targets. The Mongol banners have disappeared over the horizon, seeking fresh conquests. There is no home to return to. The place you knew exists now only in memory. Its walls, its people, its very name erased as if they never were. This was the true Mongol legacy, not merely winning battles, but removing civilizations from history itself. A strategy so devastating it built history's largest land empire, yet couldn't erase every voice. Even after the empire's fall, the memories of what was done to these vanished cities endured. They remind us that history isn't just written by the victors, it's also carried in the silent stories of those who were meant to be forgotten. These echoes from the past challenge us to look beyond grand monuments and official chronicles, to listen for the whispers that nearly disappeared forever.